The barbershop smells like aftershave, burnt clippers, and something bitter no one can name. It's late afternoon and the waiting area buzzes with low conversations and the hum of sports radio from an old wall speaker. In the corner, a young black boy sits rigid in a torn red barber chair. His name is Malik. He's only 10, and he's not supposed to be here, not like this. His eyes shift nervously to the mirror, but he avoids looking at himself. The clippers buzz too close to his ear, their vibration rough and punishing. Behind him stands a white police officer in uniform, sleeves rolled to the elbows, hand firm on Malik's shoulder. He's not related to the boy. He's not here for a community program. He claims Malik was disturbing peace outside a local shop and needed discipline. No one questions him. The badge shines brighter than the discomfort on the boy's face. The barber, a middle-aged man who's cut hair in this neighborhood for 20 years, hesitates. His hands twitch around the clippers. He's never seen anything like this. A uniformed cop dragging in a child, demanding a haircut as some sort of lesson. The officer tells him to shave it all off, says the boy needs to look respectable and understand rules. People in the shop glance at each other. Some grip their phones. Others lower their eyes. No one speaks. No one moves. The silence is heavy, like sweat on skin during a heat wave. Malik's hair begins to fall in uneven clumps onto the tile floor. His curls, once neatly tied with a rubber band, now drop like pieces of something sacred being stripped away. The officer watches, arms crossed, satisfied. He jokes about cleaning up the community, but no one laughs. Outside, cars pass. Inside, something raw unravels. Malik doesn't cry, but his reflection tells another story. His lips pressed tight, his eyes wide but distant. He doesn't understand why this is happening. All he knows is that he was walking home with his comic book, and now he's being humiliated in front of strangers. One of those strangers is a black man in a black jacket. He came in for a trim, now forgotten. He doesn't film, he doesn't speak, but he watches, every second, because he's seen this kind of power before. It has a look, it has a rhythm, and it always starts quietly. The clippers stop abruptly. The barber clears his throat, wipes his brow. Malik's head is now half-shaved, patchy, exposed. The officer smirks, says the boy is getting the message. He reaches for a phone, maybe to snap a photo, maybe for something worse. Then the front door swings open. Two officers enter, one white, one black. The black officer walks with purpose. His eyes sweep the room. They fall on Malik, then on the man standing over him. His face hardens. This isn't a routine patrol. This isn't coincidence. This is his son. The black officer's name is Raymond Cole. He's been with the department 15 years. He coached youth basketball. He volunteers on weekends. And now he's staring at his child, half-shaved, seated in a chair he never authorized, under the hand of a man who wears the same uniform he does. The room shifts. No one speaks. Not yet. Because something just snapped. Not loud, not violent, but final. And every person in that room feels it, because sometimes injustice doesn't announce itself. It walks in quietly, in a badge and a smirk, until someone walks in behind it. Raymond Cole doesn't yell. He doesn't ask questions. He simply walks across the room with the kind of stillness that makes noise unnecessary. His boots hit the floor like gavel strikes. The room, already tense, turns silent in a new way, one that tightens chests and stills breathing. The white officer takes a step back, confused at first, then alert. His hand drops from Malik's chair. He starts to speak, but Raymond raises a hand, not as a threat but as an interruption. Everyone recognizes the gesture. It means wait. It means don't you dare. The barber freezes behind the chair, clippers still warm in his palm. He doesn't know what to do next. He's witnessed 100 arguments, a dozen near fights, but never this. A uniformed officer confronting another in a space meant for community, not command. Malik sees his father. Recognition hits in waves. Relief first, then shame, then something that has no name. His hands grip the armrests tighter. He tries not to look at the mirror, but it's too late. His own reflection betrays him. The child that walked into the shop no longer exists. What's left is something raw, something taken. Raymond finally speaks, but not to the room. He speaks to the officer, firm and cold, and asks him to explain himself. There's no shouting, no emotion, just procedure laced with quiet rage. The other officer stammers something about public disturbance, about respect, about sending a message. Raymond listens without blinking. He asks if the officer filed a report. He didn't. He asks if the boy resisted. He didn't. He asks what law justifies forced grooming of a minor without parental consent. There isn't one. The officer tries to redirect, to suggest that Raymond should be grateful someone was correcting bad behavior. That's when the second officer, the white one who entered with Raymond, shifts uncomfortably. He's realizing he's not just a witness now, he's part of whatever comes next. Raymond doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. He states flatly that the officer is to leave the shop immediately and report to internal affairs by end of shift. There's no room for negotiation. The badge may give authority, but what just happened wasn't authority. It was humiliation wrapped in protocol. The officer hesitates. Pride hangs heavy on his shoulders. But Raymond steps forward, not to intimidate, but to make space. It's a dismissal, not loud but final. The officer walks out. No applause, no sighs of relief, just quiet. Raymond turns to his son. He doesn't speak. He doesn't kneel. He simply places a hand on Malik's shoulder, not to control but to reassure. Malik's body softens just slightly. He doesn't cry, not yet, but the trembling in his fingers slows. Raymond tells the barber he'll handle the rest. The man nods and steps back, relieved and ashamed. He didn't know what to do, and now that it's over, he wonders if doing nothing was already too much. The other officer watches, hands folded, silent. He knows this won't stay in the shop. He knows people recorded parts of it. He knows the department will scramble, some to deny, others to defend. But no one will forget the image. A cop forcing a child into a haircut, and another cop, his father, walking in and ending it without a word raised. Outside, the street has changed. A small crowd has formed. Word spreads fast in neighborhoods like this, and phones are faster than radio. People stand with uncertain eyes, some recording, some just present. Raymond and Malik step out together. No speeches, no explanations, just exit. A man in the crowd says something under his breath. Not mockery, just disbelief. No one expected a father to show up in uniform and hold another uniform accountable. And maybe that's the problem, because the uniform is supposed to protect. But sometimes it only protects itself. And when it turns on one of its own, especially a child, that's when the badge becomes a mask. And in that moment, someone must choose to wear it or to tear it off. By morning, the video has spread across every major platform. It's not long, just 47 seconds. There's no shouting, no fight, no blood. Only a uniformed officer standing behind a black child in a barber chair smirking. Only a second officer, black, steady, stepping in and saying nothing, but changing everything. The footage is grainy, taken from the corner of the shop, but it captures the room clearly enough. Malik's half-shaved head, the white officer's relaxed posture, Raymond's stillness. In less than 6 hours, it's been viewed over 2 million times. Hashtags multiply like brush fire. Some focus on the child. Hashtag hands off our kids. Others name the father. Chash Officer Cole. And others, more pointed, ask who gave permission? Camille Brooks, a local journalist known for exposing quiet abuses, posts the clip with a one-line caption. A badge without restraint is a weapon. The story climbs into national trend lists before noon. Newsrooms scramble for context. Officials draft statements before understanding what happened. The department is silent, for now. Inside the Cole apartment, Malik refuses to leave his room. He hasn't said much since they got home. He ate a little, didn't sleep. Now he just lies on his bed, face turned toward the wall, away from mirrors, away from phones. Raymond sits in the kitchen with his badge on the table. Not because he's going anywhere, but because it feels heavier than it should. He stares at it for a long time. No anger, just wait. The department finally responds just after noon. A short press release states they are reviewing the incident and that appropriate internal procedures are underway. No names are mentioned. No apology offered. It doesn't matter. People have already decided what they saw. At a nearby high school, students stage a walkout. They wear makeshift capes of black barber cloth and chant through the hallways. Not because they know Malik personally, but because they recognize the feeling. That power doesn't need to yell to humiliate. Sometimes it just needs to be obeyed. Across the city, the police union releases a counter-statement. They urge the public not to rush to judgment and remind everyone that Officers face difficult decisions in the field every day. The words ring hollow. Because this wasn't a gun, it wasn't a chase, it was a pair of clippers, a child, and someone who thought control was the same as justice. Raymond receives 2 calls from Internal Affairs. One from his direct supervisor, measured, polite, but cautious. Another from a deputy chief, less polite, more direct. They want him to clarify events. They want to know why he confronted a fellow officer in public. He doesn't answer either call right away. Instead, he writes a statement, not to defend himself, but to explain why silence in that moment would have made him complicit. He includes details no one saw, that Malik hadn't done anything wrong, that no arrest was made, that the officer never filed a report because there was nothing to report. Just an ego too big to handle a child's voice. Camille reaches out later that evening. She doesn't want a quote. She wants perspective. Raymond declines, for now. He says the child matters more than the commentary. That night, the city glows with images of a boy who never asked to be seen. His face turned slightly from the camera, his head uneven and raw, his eyes caught between confusion and shame. People start painting murals, some online, some on alley walls, not of Raymond, not even of the officer, but of Malik, sitting tall in the barber chair, face forward, untouched, not because that's how it happened, but because that's how it should have. Because some wounds don't bleed, they echo. And the louder the world watches, the clearer the silence becomes. Raymond returns to work 2 days later, uniform pressed, expression unreadable. The moment he steps into the precinct, the atmosphere changes, conversations lower, heads turn slightly, then snap away. The front desk officer offers no greeting. Someone coughs behind a computer screen, then falls silent again. Raymond doesn't respond. He moves forward like a man walking through fog, aware that he's being watched, but no longer interested in the watchers. His locker has been emptied of anything personal. The family photo, the keychain from Malik's first baseball game, even the mug he kept for years, all gone. In their place, a printed memo is taped to the inside of the locker door. It reminds officers of the department's social media policy and warns against conduct that damages trust within the force. No name is attached. It doesn't have to be. The message is clear. Speak up, and you're no longer one of us. Internal Affairs schedules a meeting for the end of the week. Raymond knows what it means. It won't be a conversation. It will be a framing. They'll ask measured questions that imply guilt, that seek contradiction, not because they need to discipline him, but because they need to contain the fallout. He understands the department isn't worried about what happened to Malik. They're worried that people saw it. Meanwhile, Malik returns to school. His mother walks him to the door but doesn't go inside. She knows her presence would only make it harder. The principal meets him with a soft voice and a nervous smile, but Malik hears the whispers before he reaches his classroom. Kids glance up and down his scalp, still uneven despite attempts to fix it. A few smile kindly, others nudge each other and mutter. Even those who say nothing seem to carry questions in their eyes. In the lunchroom, Malik sits alone. The kids from his bus table avoid eye contact. One boy tells another not to get too loud. "You might get a haircut." The joke hangs in the air, sour and uneasy. Malik eats slowly, mechanically, pushing his food around more than he consumes it. The noise around him becomes distant, like water through walls. His world shrinks to a plastic tray and a cafeteria table. That evening, a letter arrives at the Cole apartment from the department's legal office. It's sealed in a plain envelope with no return name. Inside is a formal notification. Raymond's conduct during the barbershop incident is under review. He is advised not to speak publicly, not to contact media, and not to involve non-departmental advocacy. The tone is cold but familiar. It's the same language used when protecting image over accountability. Raymond reads it twice, then places it face down. Malik sits nearby, headphones on, pretending to watch a show he isn't following. The silence between them isn't tension, it's exhaustion. Neither of them asks how the other is doing. Both already know. Across the city, a mural is painted over during the night. The one of Malik in the chair, gone by sunrise. In its place, a white wall and a small tag in red spray paint. Respect the badge. No one claims responsibility. The city doesn't comment. Camille posts a photo of the blank wall with a caption that reads only, "This is what fear looks like in daylight." The online conversation shifts again. Some defend the mural's removal, calling it biased. Others demand its restoration. A few suggest that Raymond used his role for personal gain. The noise rises. Facts blur. Intentions are rewritten by people who weren't there. Through it all, Raymond stays silent. Not because he agrees, but because the truth no longer needs his voice, it needs his endurance. He prepares his notes for the hearing at week's end. They're brief, clear. He won't argue, he won't apologize. He'll state what happened and why standing still would have meant betrayal. Not just of his son, but of every principle stitched into the uniform he still wears. Because at some point, a badge stops being what you wear. It becomes what you carry. And the heavier it gets, the more you have to decide if it's still worth the weight. The hearing begins in a small room without windows. 3 members from Internal Affairs sit behind a narrow table, expressionless. A recorder sits between them, blinking red. Raymond enters alone. No lawyer, no union rep, just a slim folder tucked under his arm and a badge clipped to his chest that no longer feels like protection. They don't ask how he is. They don't ask about Malik. They begin with protocol, his location at the time of the incident, the actions taken, the rationale. Their voices are measured, legal, detached. It isn't a conversation. It's containment. Raymond answers clearly. He outlines the timeline, the chain of events, and the officer's decision to forcibly alter a minor's appearance without cause or consent. He explains his own decision to intervene, not emotionally, not with outrage, but with presence. He reminds them that no law supports what happened in that barbershop. What followed was not a confrontation. It was correction. The panel listens, but their pens move more than their eyes. Every word Raymond says feels recorded, not heard. They thank him at the end, tell him he'll be notified of the outcome, and dismiss him without standing. Outside the building, the sky is gray and damp. A low fog curls around the parking lot. Raymond walks to his car slowly, aware that no one came to support him, aware that some may be watching from behind curtains, waiting to see if he cracks. That evening, Malik sits on the floor of his room with a sketchbook open. He draws without focus, lines looping into shapes, figures that resemble no one but feel like everyone. At school, the tension has shifted. He isn't mocked anymore. He's avoided. Some students look at him with sympathy, others with fear. The teachers smile too much, ask if he's okay too often, and never quite know what to do with his silence. One classmate slips him a note that says, "That was wrong." Nothing more. Malik folds it twice and places it inside the back cover of his book. He doesn't respond, but he doesn't throw it away either. Camille releases a new article the next morning. It doesn't include quotes or footage. It's just a written account of what happened from the perspective of someone who wasn't there, but who's seen it before. She writes about how injustice wears many uniforms, and sometimes the most dangerous kind speaks in policy. The piece spreads quickly. People repost it not because it's new, but because it says what they've struggled to name. Raymond reads it over coffee, alone in his kitchen. He doesn't flinch when he sees his name. The words don't praise or defend, they just outline. He appreciates that. Not all support needs applause. The department remains silent. No official outcome is shared, but changes happen quietly. The officer who brought Malik into the shop is reassigned to desk duty. Not fired, not named, just moved. Whispers reach Raymond from a colleague who still respects him. The department doesn't want escalation. They fear precedent. If one officer can be punished for intervening against another, it invites scrutiny of every silence before. Malik's mural, the one that had been painted over, returns overnight. Not exactly the same, but close. This time, it shows him standing, not in a chair, not under anyone's hand. Just standing, hoodie loose, head full, looking forward. No caption, just space. People pass it quietly the next day. Some stop, some snap photos. No one paints over it again. The school principal calls the house in the afternoon. She says Malik has been chosen to write something for an upcoming youth assembly, not because of what happened, but because of how he's handled it. Raymond asks Malik if he wants to do it. Malik nods, slowly, then opens his sketchbook and flips to the page where the note was tucked. He stares at it for a moment, then starts writing next to it. Later, Raymond walks by his room and glances in. He doesn't interrupt. He just watches his son write, quiet, steady, with a kind of focus that reminds him of something he'd nearly forgotten. Because silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's the sound of something building. 3 days after Malik's speech spreads online, A city council member issues a public statement. It's cautious but clear. She calls for a formal review of non-criminal stops involving minors and emphasizes the need for ethical boundaries within community policing. Her words are measured, carefully chosen, but they mark the first sign of institutional movement since the video surfaced. It isn't an apology, it isn't a demand, but it's something. And in systems built on silence, something is rare. At the precinct, reactions vary. Some officers nod quietly when Raymond's name is mentioned, others avoid eye contact altogether. A few openly express frustration, not about what happened, but about how visible it became. They speak of lost public trust, of media distortion, of how the department is always under attack. None of them mention Malik. None of them ask why a child was in that chair in the first place. Raymond doesn't return to patrol. He doesn't explain his choice. His badge remains in the locker, untouched. He responds to no press inquiries and declines all public comments. His silence isn't retreat, it's refusal. A refusal to normalize, to dilute, to shift blame where none belongs. Malik continues going to school. The attention hasn't disappeared, but it's changed shape. Teachers give him space without avoiding him. Students ask more questions than they used to. One day, a younger boy hands him a folded drawing during recess. A stick figure with a full head of hair and a small shield in its hand. No words, just image. Malik thanks him without speaking. Camille publishes a follow-up piece titled, "When Silence Leads." This time, she focuses on the ripple effect of Malik's words rather than the incident itself. She interviews educators, therapists, and local organizers. She finds stories that echo the same pattern: quiet harm, unspoken fear, and the long, slow work of building spaces where children don't have to earn dignity, they're given it. The mural of Malik, once painted over and resurrected, is now framed by candles and folded notes. People leave messages, not just for him, but for their own sons, daughters, siblings. The wall becomes less a protest and more a gathering. Strangers begin to speak to one another there, not about justice in headlines, but about what safety feels like in everyday life. Meanwhile, a retired officer named Ellis Grant reaches out to Camille. He served in the same department for over 30 years. He tells her he's watched too many versions of this same story: abuse followed by silence, silence followed by erasure. He says what happened wasn't unusual, it was just recorded. Camille includes his comments anonymously, but they hit a nerve. Other former officers begin speaking up, some quietly through private networks, others in open forums. They don't defend the department, they don't condemn it either, they describe it, and in doing so, they paint a picture of a culture more loyal to protection than to correction. City Hall announces a new oversight panel. It will include civilians, legal advisors, and for the first time, 2 high school representatives. The decision is met with mixed reactions. Some call it a publicity stunt, others say it's overdue. Raymond says nothing. He spends most of his time walking, through neighborhoods he used to patrol, past the barbershop that's since gone quiet, through parks where kids still play without knowing their city has shifted. Not in revolution, not in rage, but in recognition. He visits the mural once, alone. He doesn't linger. He places a small pin at the base, a silver shield, dull and worn, the kind given to rookies on their first day. Then he walks away, not because he's leaving something behind, but because what needed to be said no longer requires his voice. Because sometimes justice doesn't speak in commands or headlines. It speaks in choices, and some of those choices begin not with power, but with stepping aside so others can finally step forward. The first meeting of the newly formed oversight panel takes place inside a library instead of a courtroom. The setting is intentional. Long wooden tables replace desks, and the walls are lined with books instead of policies. There's no judge's bench, no microphone, no gavel. Just people, students, advocates, officials, and civilians, sitting in folding chairs arranged in a wide circle. Among them are 2 high school representatives, both under 17, both wearing school-issued lanyards and sneakers too big for their confidence. They don't speak at first, they listen. Their presence alone is enough to shift the room's rhythm. For years, discussions about justice and reform have happened above them. Now, they're in the room. Camille attends as a guest observer. She takes notes, but not like a journalist, more like a witness. She watches how the adults glance at each other before speaking. How some talk in circles, using phrases like measured accountability and community recalibration. The students say nothing, but their eyes don't blink as much as the others. The panel begins by reviewing recent department policy. A printed packet outlines procedures for disciplinary discretion and community engagement, but no one mentions Malik, not directly. His name doesn't appear on the agenda, yet everyone in the room understands why they're there. His silence still echoes across every word. Outside the library, a small group gathers with signs. They aren't angry, they aren't shouting. They hold photos of children, some smiling, some not, and hand out pamphlets that ask a single question: who speaks for those too young to be heard? Raymond doesn't attend the meeting. He hasn't worn his uniform since clearing out his locker. He walks by the building during the session, unnoticed, hands in his jacket pockets. He doesn't go inside. He doesn't need to. His presence isn't what matters now. Inside, one of the students finally raises a hand. He asks whether the panel will make recommendations or decisions. A pause follows. The moderator explains that the panel is advisory, not authoritative. The student nods but doesn't smile. He leans back in his chair, not in defiance but in calculation. He's learning the structure of the room, how language can include without empowering. After the meeting, Camille speaks to one of the panel members, a retired judge who once oversaw juvenile cases. He tells her that including students is symbolic, but that symbols matter. They mark beginnings. Camille writes that phrase in her notebook, but underlines it lightly. Not because she doubts it, but because she knows beginnings mean little without follow-through. That night, Malik works on a short story for class. It's not about the barber shop. It's not even about a child. It's about a small bird that gets lost in a city full of glass buildings. The bird keeps flying into windows, thinking they're sky. In the end, it stops flying altogether and builds a nest inside a streetlight. His teacher reads the story 3 times before marking it with a single word: sharp. Raymond reads the story too. He doesn't ask what it means. He simply places it in a folder with the note Malik once received at school. The one that said, "That was wrong." The folder is filling slowly. He doesn't know what he'll do with it yet, but it feels like something worth keeping. The mural remains untouched now. People have stopped photographing it. It's become part of the neighborhood, no longer a statement but a fixture. Children pass it without pointing. Adults nod at it like an old friend. It hasn't faded, but it no longer needs the spotlight. It simply exists. In a city like this, existence is an achievement. A local podcast mentions the oversight panel in their closing segment. They don't talk about structure or policy. They talk about presence. How it changes things. How sometimes just sitting in the room rewrites the tone of what's said inside it. Because authority doesn't always come from age or rank. Sometimes it comes from quiet endurance. And sometimes the most powerful seat at the table is the one no one expected to matter. The attention begins to fade, as it always does. The trending tags disappear from timelines, replaced by new outrages, fresh debates, faster news. Comment sections go quiet. Shared videos stall in their reach. Even the mural, once a magnet for movement, now gathers more dust than cameras. It isn't rejection, it's exhaustion. People care, but they also move on. That's how cycles survive. Malik notices it first. He walks to school without passing strangers who nod in recognition. No teachers mention his speech anymore. The stares have stopped, but so have the soft reassurances, the unspoken shields that once followed him down the hall. He isn't relieved. He isn't disappointed. He's just adjusting. At home, he spends more time alone. His drawings shift. The shapes grow sharper, the figures smaller. He still writes, but not as often. The words come slower, as if weighed down by expectation. He understands something now that he couldn't name before, that being seen once doesn't guarantee being heard again. Raymond notices too. The stillness in the house grows longer. His own days blur together. No badge, no uniform, no patrol. He receives no updates from the department, and he no longer expects any. He reads more, walks more, says less. Sometimes he stands by the window and watches the sidewalk like it owes him something. Other times, he opens Malik's sketchbook when his son isn't looking, not to invade, but to understand what silence draws when it runs out of shape. Camille pitches another article to her editor, but it gets turned down. Too similar to the last one. Not timely anymore. She doesn't fight it. Instead, she begins recording voice notes on her phone. Fragmented thoughts, quotes that never made it into print, questions without answers. She isn't building a story, she's preserving a thread, something to return to when the world pretends it's over. The oversight panel meets again, but fewer people show up. One student rep doesn't return, citing schedule conflicts. The other stays but speaks less. The circle feels looser. The momentum that carried it forward now drags like weight. Still they meet. Still they listen. It isn't failure, it's friction. Change, once exciting, has slowed into effort. One afternoon, Malik stays after school for a writing club. Only 4 students show up. The teacher offers prompts. Most ignore them. Malik writes about glass, how it can protect or separate, reflect or distort. He writes about how it looks invisible until you run into it. Then he stops and tears the page in half. The teacher doesn't ask why. That night, Raymond receives a call from a precinct contact. Unofficial. Off the record. The officer who brought Malik into the barbershop has quietly resigned. No announcement, no acknowledgement, just gone. Raymond doesn't respond. He thanks the caller, then deletes the message. There's nothing to celebrate in erasure. Nothing to trust in silence that comes without admission. Outside the mural, someone leaves a small photo taped to the wall. It's not of Malik, it's of another child. No name, no note, just eyes too wide and shoulders too tense for their age. The photo disappears by morning. No one claims it, but the image lingers in those who saw it. Proof that stories like Malik's aren't alone, just unrecorded. At the kitchen table, Malik draws again. This time, the figure isn't a bird or a boy. It's a house, small, cracked at the corners, one window boarded up, smoke rising from the chimney in a crooked line. At the base, he writes a single word, still. Raymond sees it later. He doesn't ask what it means, but he copies the drawing and tucks it inside the folder with the others. The folder is thicker now, not just paper, but memory. Proof that some things don't fade. They collect. Because change isn't loud. It doesn't shout to be known. Sometimes it waits quietly in the days no one watches, the ones between outrage and outcome, where the real work hides. A flyer appears on bulletin boards around the neighborhood. It's printed in grayscale, corners stapled or taped down in crooked lines. The heading reads, Community Art Day, Healing Through Color. Below it, a date, a time, and the name of a local youth center. There are no logos, no sponsors, just a simple invitation. Malik sees one of the flyers posted on a telephone pole near his school. He reads it twice before walking past, then circles back later. He doesn't tell anyone he plans to go. He just shows up on Saturday morning with his sketchbook tucked under his arm and no idea what he'll do with it. The center is brighter than he expects. Long folding tables stretch across the main room, each covered with paper, paint, pencils, glue, and brushes. Kids gather at different stations, some focused, others laughing, a few unsure of why they came. Adults drift along the walls, watching without interfering. Music hums from an old speaker. Nothing loud, just enough to soften the space. Malik finds a quiet spot near the back. He opens his sketchbook, flips past the pages he doesn't want anyone to see, and tears out a blank sheet. At first, he just draws lines, horizontal, thick, layered. Then shapes begin to form. They don't make sense right away. They aren't meant to. He works without stopping. Nearby, another boy paints with both hands. His fingers are stained blue and green. He drops more color than he keeps on the paper, but he smiles the whole time. Malik watches him briefly, then returns to his own work. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. By noon, the room transforms. The tables are full of creations, some wild, some careful, some barely begun. What matters isn't the product. It's the proof that something was expressed, that hands moved, that silence was given shape. A woman walks around taking photos, not for publicity, just for memory. She pauses at Malik's table and nods once, then moves on without comment. Malik doesn't look up. He's still adding shadows to a series of windows inside a large, unfamiliar building. Each window is different, some broken, some glowing. One is taped over. Raymond hears about the event from a neighbor. He doesn't attend, but he drives past slowly once, just to see the crowd. He parks across the street and watches through the windshield. The kids, the art, the gentle mess of it all. For the first time in weeks, he doesn't feel the need to step into the room. It's enough to know his son is in there and that no one's trying to fix him. Later that night, Malik leaves his drawing on the kitchen table. He doesn't say anything. Raymond finds it while putting away dishes. It's not signed. It doesn't need to be. He stares at it for a long time before sliding it into the folder with the others. The folder barely closes now. Across the city, the mural fades. Not from vandalism or protest, just from time. The sun wears down the paint, the edges fray, and dust clings to the lower bricks. People stop photographing it. Some forget it's there. But others still pause when they pass by, especially in the early morning light, when the wall catches just enough shadow to bring the image back to life for a second. Camille writes again, not for print this time, just for herself. She describes the pace of forgetting, how stories slow, then stop, not because they end, but because they become part of the background. She wonders what kind of justice survives when no one's watching. Then she closes her notebook and opens a folder labeled Unfinished. At school, Malik turns in another story. This one is shorter. It's about a hallway that changes length depending on who walks through it. Sometimes it's 5 steps, sometimes it's 50. At the end of the hallway, there's always a mirror, but the reflection doesn't show what you look like. It shows what you lost on the way. The teacher reads it twice, then posts it on the classroom wall under the word perspective. Malik says nothing when she tells him. He just looks at it once on his way out the door, because not every story ends with justice. But some stories don't end at all. They fold inward, layer by layer, until they become something that doesn't go back. The folder on Raymond's desk has grown thick. Its edges curl from use, its clasp barely holds. Inside are drawings, notes, scribbled paragraphs, half-finished sketches, and one folded photo he never asked for but never threw away. It doesn't contain evidence. It holds weight, emotional, persistent, unsorted. Raymond opens it each morning now. He doesn't read it cover to cover. He flips through it like someone trying to remember what a voice sounds like, scanning fragments not for answers, but for rhythm. Each page brings back a moment that no longer gets talked about. He doesn't need to speak to feel its presence. The neighborhood around him settles into a strange kind of stillness, not silence, just a quieter intensity. The murals remain. The flyers stop appearing. Schools return to their rhythms. Patrol cars pass slower but stop less often. Conversations taper off. Anger doesn't disappear. It just lowers its volume. And under that volume, something else begins to grow. Distance. Camille revisits her recordings. Not for publication, but for shape. She listens to voices from months ago. Parents, students, retired officers, teachers, some speaking clearly, others hesitating between words. She plays them on a loop as she cleans her apartment, cooks, organizes files. The recordings fill her rooms not with noise, but with grounding, with continuity. One evening, she walks by the youth center. The doors are open and music filters out onto the sidewalk. She doesn't go in. She stands outside and watches through the windows. Inside, kids paint on canvas pinned to the walls. One of them looks like Malik, but she's not sure. She writes one sentence in her notebook that night. Justice doesn't end. It echoes until someone answers. Malik stays late after school more often now. Not in detention. Not for clubs. Just to sit in the library. He doesn't always read. Sometimes he stares at the shelves like they're too full to choose from. He opens books, flips 3 pages, then closes them. He draws maps on notebook paper. Neighborhood blocks, street corners, intersections with names only he recognizes. Some of them are real. Some aren't. He marks them with arrows, circles, quiet questions. His teacher asks if he's working on a project. Malik shrugs, then nods. He doesn't explain. He doesn't know how. The maps aren't about direction. They're about placement. He's not looking for a way out. He's trying to prove he exists within it. Raymond begins attending community forums, not as a speaker, not in uniform, just as a face in the crowd. He listens. Sometimes he takes notes, but mostly he watches. He watches how people speak when they know they're being heard. How the confident talk louder and the tired lean back. He notes who interrupts, who waits, who folds their arms and checks the clock. At one forum, a young man presents a proposal for restorative justice circles in schools. Raymond recognizes the name. He was one of the first people to share Malik's speech online. Now he's pitching policy with a whiteboard and a printout. The room nods. No one claps. No one needs to. Raymond approaches him after the meeting. He doesn't introduce himself. He just listens to the conversation around him, then steps aside. The young man notices, nods once, and continues talking. That's enough. At home, Malik pins one of his maps to the wall beside his desk. This one has no street names, just lines and shapes, some shaded, some left empty. In the center, a small dot. He draws a circle around it, then two more, like ripples on water. It's not a place. It's an echo. It's a reminder that something happened there, and that it still vibrates outward even after people stop pointing at it. Because memory doesn't expire. It doesn't vanish when the cameras leave. It becomes quieter, deeper, more permanent than applause. Malik's map stays on the wall longer than any of his other drawings. He doesn't update it. He doesn't add new streets or symbols. It just sits there, quiet, fixed, surrounded by blank space. Over time, the paper curls slightly at the edges, but he doesn't tape it down. He lets it shift. He likes the way it moves when the window is open. It makes the map feel alive, like it's breathing slowly in a room that usually holds its air too tight. Raymond notices the change. Not just the map, but Malik's routine. He speaks a little more, eats without being asked twice, goes to bed without dragging his feet. The weight hasn't lifted, but it's been redistributed, spread across small habits, shared with paper and pencils and a wall that holds more than decoration. Raymond doesn't mention the map. He doesn't need to. He understands that some things don't require commentary, only space to exist. Camille pulls her old drafts from the unfinished folder. She lays them out on her floor, page by page, like pieces of a broken photograph. Headlines, quotes, notes scribbled in the margins. She rearranges them not by date but by tone. What began as articles now feel like chapters, fragments of a larger voice that she didn't realize she'd been assembling. She starts writing again. Not for a blog, not for a column, for a book. A story not about one incident but about the silence between them. The connective tissue no one names but everyone feels. She visits the mural again, not to take notes, not to photograph it. She just stands across the street and watches how it catches the evening light. The details are fading now. Paint cracking at the edges, corners peeling where moisture seeps in. But the shape remains, the posture, the gaze. It no longer demands attention. It holds memory. At school, Malik's teacher gives the class an assignment. Write a letter to someone who changed your perspective. Most students choose a parent, a friend, a coach. Malik writes to someone he's never met. He doesn't name them. The letter describes a moment on a train platform, a stranger helping an elderly man pick up dropped groceries while others passed by. He says the moment didn't change the world, but it changed what he expected from it. The letter gets posted on the school's digital board. It isn't shared widely. It doesn't go viral. But the librarian prints a copy and tapes it near the checkout desk. One student reads it, then another. No one asks who wrote it. They just nod, like the words said something they'd been waiting to hear. Raymond finds a call log from 6 months ago tucked inside a drawer, an old voicemail saved from the day after the barbershop incident. He plays it once. It's a message from an officer he hasn't spoken to since. The voice is steady but uncertain, offering support without commitment. Raymond deletes it without reaction. The message came too late. Support that waits for safety isn't support at all. Instead, he visits a neighborhood watch meeting, not as a guest speaker or retired cop, just as someone who used to stand in uniform and now chooses to stand without it. The room is smaller than he remembers. The chairs more worn, the coffee weaker, but the voices are louder, more certain, more practiced. He doesn't say much. He just listens, takes notes, and shakes hands without offering a title. That night, Malik adds something to his map, a single red dot near the edge of the paper. He doesn't explain what it is. It could be a new place, a memory, a warning, a beginning. Then he draws a thin line from the center of the map to the dot. The line isn't straight. It curves, bends, almost breaks, then reconnects. When he's done, he steps back and stares at it like someone checking if a story still makes sense after time has passed, because stories don't end when the world stops watching. They shift. They stretch into places no one's named yet, and if you map them honestly, they always leave room for what comes next. A week after Malik adds the red dot to his map, his art teacher notices something she hadn't before. She's seen the drawings, watched him sketch during quiet moments, submit work with hesitant hands, but now the map catches her attention, not because it's neat or precise, but because it holds something her curriculum can't explain. She takes a photo of it, not for display, not for grading, just to remember how a child told a story without words. She shares the image at a district-wide educators meeting. Quietly. No names, no backstory, just a slide in a presentation about visual expression in middle school students. But it stays with the audience longer than any data point that day. One principal emails afterward, asking if the student would ever consider contributing to a city art showcase. No pressure, just an open invitation. Malik's teacher tells him gently without ceremony. He listens, then shrugs. She says the showcase is optional. He doesn't answer. But that night he pulls the map from the wall and tapes a fresh page beside it. Not to replace the old one, just to continue. Raymond notices the change. He doesn't comment. Instead, he digs through the folder that now barely fits in the kitchen drawer. He pulls out Malik's earliest sketch, the one with the crooked streetlight and the bird that refused to fly. He places it beside the new sheet on the table. Then he steps back and lets the images talk to each other. Camille finishes her first draft. The book is rough, uneven chapters, repeated thoughts, pages that start strong then trail off. But it holds. It feels less like a report and more like a conversation that took too long to begin. She doesn't send it to her publisher, not yet. She prints one copy and places it in a plain binder on her desk. She writes one word on the cover. Echoes. She walks past the mural again. It's nearly faded now, the lines soft, the colors dusted over, but someone, unknown, unannounced, has drawn a small red dot in chalk at the bottom right corner. It's faint, easy to miss, but Camille sees it and smiles, not because she understands it fully, but because she knows it means someone else is still paying attention. At school, Malik finishes the second map. This one is different, more open, more color. He adds shapes that don't look like buildings, lines that don't follow streets. When the teacher asks what they are, he just says, movement. Nothing more. She frames both maps side by side and hangs them in the hallway during parent night. Most visitors walk past them quickly, but one mother stops. She doesn't speak. She just stares until her child pulls her away. Raymond receives a letter in the mail. It's handwritten, the envelope unmarked. Inside, a note from an old academy instructor. He'd heard about the incident through other officers. The note doesn't offer judgment or advice. It simply says that memory is a more honest teacher than any badge. Raymond folds the letter and places it inside the folder without hesitation. The neighborhood begins to shift again. Not loudly, not visibly, but in ways that show up during pauses. Conversations at bus stops last a little longer. People ask questions they didn't before. A local high school begins planning a student-led safety walk, not in protest but in presence. They invite Raymond, he attends but doesn't speak. He walks in silence, hands in his jacket pockets, surrounded by kids who are learning to move forward without waiting for permission. Malik sees the event on a poster outside the school. He doesn't ask to join. He just shows up, walking behind the group at his own pace, notebook in hand. He doesn't draw during the walk. He listens, to shoes on pavement, to laughter echoing off buildings, to the rhythm of steps finding alignment even when they begin apart. When he gets home, he adds a new line to his map. It curves wide, circles the center, and ends near the red dot. No arrows, no title, just motion. Because some stories don't seek attention. They make space. They don't fight to be heard. They wait until someone is quiet enough to feel where they've been. The school hallway grows quieter after the maps are hung, not from disinterest, but from attention. Students pass them in silence now, slowing down, glancing sideways, then continuing. Some stop longer. One girl traces the path of the red line with her eyes each morning before homeroom. A boy in another grade sketches his own map in the margins of his notebook, hiding it between math problems and vocabulary words. No one says it out loud, but something has shifted. Not in policy, not in structure, but in permission. The art teacher notices. She doesn't make a lesson out of it. She doesn't announce a project. Instead, she sets out blank paper beside the classroom sink each day. No instructions. By Friday, the stack is half gone, and the drying rack holds pages filled with shapes that don't match any rubric, circles without centers, lines that lead off the page, color patterns that skip predictability. She knows better than to ask what they mean. Camille returns to her draft. The binder marked Echoes sits open beside a legal pad filled with names, some real, some composite. She isn't writing exposé anymore. She's layering. Not just moments, but responses. how people reacted, how they carried what didn't make the news. She revisits older interviews, listens for things she missed the first time, pauses, hesitations, shifts in breath. She begins writing new sections with more space between paragraphs, allowing quiet to speak. She prints 2 copies of the latest draft. One stays on her desk, the other she slides into a manila envelope with no return address. She leaves it at the front desk of the youth center with a note that says only, "Thank you for teaching me how to listen." Malik doesn't know about the envelope. He's been spending more time on the back steps of the building after school. Sometimes he writes, other times he just watches the street. He's begun noticing small things, how light bends across windshields, how older kids wait for each other without words, how the same delivery truck always passes at 3:48 p.m. These details don't go into a story. They stay with him, waiting for shape. Raymond gets a call from the community liaison at City Hall. There's an upcoming roundtable, small, off-the-record, focused on lived experience in policing and community reconciliation. He's told there's no pressure to attend. They simply want presence. Raymond hesitates, not because he doesn't care, but because he's learned that rooms designed for listening rarely begin that way. Still, he agrees. He doesn't prepare notes. He doesn't rehearse anything. When the day arrives, he enters the room and takes a seat near the edge of the circle. He recognizes no one. The room is filled with educators, counselors, parents, and a few retired officers. They begin by sharing stories. Not accusations, not solutions, just what happened, what stayed. When it's his turn, Raymond speaks slowly. He doesn't mention Malik. He doesn't reference policy. He describes a haircut, the clippers, the mirror, the silence afterward. He doesn't ask for reaction. He doesn't wait for affirmation. He finishes and listens as the circle moves on. It's not relief he feels. It's placement. That evening, Malik finds a folded note on his desk. It's unsigned. The handwriting is shaky but intentional. It reads, "Your maps made me remember what I forgot on purpose." There's no explanation, no return message, just the words. He reads it twice, then tucks it into the back cover of his sketchbook alongside the others. The folder his father once kept has quietly passed to him. Later that night, Malik pulls a new sheet of paper from his drawer. He doesn't start with lines. He begins with a smudge, an irregular mark near the corner. From there, he draws outward. Not roads this time. Not buildings. Just motion. As if what matters isn't where something happened, but how far its echo reaches. Because recognition doesn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes it appears folded, unsigned, left behind like proof that someone stayed long enough to see the shape of what's still becoming. Malik doesn't know who nominated him. He finds out about the youth gallery exhibit from a school bulletin posted near the cafeteria. His name is printed on a list below the words, "Emerging Voices." There's no explanation, no category, just his name and a date. When he shows the flyer to his teacher, she only smiles and says, "Sometimes the right people notice." He doesn't tell Raymond until the day before. Not out of secrecy, but because it doesn't feel like something to announce. It feels like a next step already in motion. Raymond doesn't ask for details. He simply says he'll be there, and Malik nods once before returning to his notebook. The exhibit takes place in the community center's multi-purpose room. The walls are lined with mounted frames, some photographs, others sketches, poems, digital collages, one sculpture made entirely from broken headphones. There are name tags, but no artist statements. The coordinators say the work should speak first. Malik's map is displayed near a window, lit from the side by natural light. It's the second version, the one with broader strokes, softer turns, and the red circle still visible beneath a new layer of motion. He doesn't stand near it. He walks the room slowly, hands in his pockets, watching how people pause. Some tilt their heads, others squint, searching for familiar streets. One child stares and whispers something to a parent before moving on. Raymond arrives in uniform for the first time in months, not for ceremony but for clarity. He stands near the door, nodding to strangers, watching the flow of the room. When he sees Malik standing alone near the far wall, he doesn't approach. He just watches his son blend into a crowd that finally sees him without explanation. Across town, Camille receives an envelope in her mailbox. No stamp, no address. Inside is a printed photo. The mural, nearly gone now, faded to shadows and brick. But someone has outlined the remaining edges in chalk, thin, delicate lines that restore just enough shape to make the figure visible again. Taped to the back of the photo is a single sticky note that reads, "Nothing truly disappears if you carry it right." She pins it above her desk, next to the latest draft of Echoes. She hasn't sent it out yet. Not because it isn't ready, but because she now understands it's part of something larger, something still unfolding. She opens her notebook and begins outlining a chapter she hadn't planned to write. Not about protest or policy, but about how small acts preserve momentum when attention fades. At the exhibit, a local reporter walks through with a quiet camera crew. They're there on assignment for a feature about youth expression in post-crisis neighborhoods. She asks no questions. She films from a distance. Later, she emails the center requesting artist permission for publication. Malik says yes, but only if the map isn't explained. She agrees. The feature airs late on a weekday evening. Camille records it and sends the clip to Raymond. He watches it once, then calls Malik into the room. They sit side by side, the volume low, as the camera pans slowly across drawings, faces, hands hovering over lines. No narration, just soft piano underneath. When Malik's map appears on screen, neither of them speaks. Afterward, Malik goes to his room and opens his notebook. He doesn't draw. He writes 3 lines. Some maps guide you forward, some help you look back. The hardest ones do both. He tears out the page and adds it to the back of the growing folder. Once Raymond's, now shared without ceremony. Because visibility doesn't require permission. It requires persistence. And what grows in silence often becomes the foundation for voices still waiting their turn. The morning after the feature airs, the school day begins like any other. Bells ring, lockers slam, announcements echo through the intercom. But in the art room, something is different. A new bulletin board has been cleared beside the window. The teacher doesn't say why. She simply tapes up a copy of Malik's map with no label, no title, no explanation. Below it, she places a basket of blank index cards and a sign that reads, "If it moved you, leave a mark." By the end of the week, the basket is full. Some cards hold single words: strength, home, almost. Others are drawings, arrows leading off page, dots scattered like constellations. One card has no writing at all, just a pressed leaf folded inside. Malik doesn't respond, but he reads each one, then places them inside the back cover of his notebook. He doesn't organize them. He lets them pile. Camille receives an invitation to speak at a college symposium on community narrative and media responsibility. She doesn't respond immediately. For weeks she's been writing about absence, what's left out of stories, who disappears after the camera stops rolling. She doesn't want to become another voice from the outside, summarizing a journey that's still moving. But something about this feels different. Less platform, more witness. She prepares nothing formal. Instead, she prints excerpts from Echoes and arranges them on a table in front of her. When the day comes, she walks on stage holding a single page, the one about Malik's map. She doesn't explain the boy. She doesn't share names. She reads it aloud, then folds it in half and says, "The most honest stories don't always need authors. They just need someone to leave the light on long enough for others to find them." Raymond watches the symposium from home. He doesn't tell anyone he's watching. He just sits with the sound low and his hands folded, listening to a story he already knows by heart, told in a voice that carries none of the weight, yet all of the care. When it ends, he walks to his room, opens the drawer where the folder used to live, and places a fresh sheet of paper inside. It's blank. He doesn't write anything. He just closes the drawer and lets it be there, waiting. At school, Malik begins a new piece, not a map, not a story. It's a collage. He cuts out shapes from old magazines and newspaper clippings, layering them over printed reports and torn notebook pages. In the center, he glues a piece of red string in a spiral. It doesn't connect to anything, it just spins. When the teacher asks if it's finished, he says it never will be. The collage is accepted into a city youth exhibit. This time, there's a write-up. Malik agrees to it as long as the description focuses on the viewers, not the artist. The caption reads, "A reflection on what you carry without noticing." No one questions it, no one edits it. Camille visits the exhibit quietly. She stands in front of the collage for nearly 10 minutes, hands behind her back, reading the lines between the layers. She doesn't take a picture. She doesn't write a note. She simply exhales, then leaves. That night, Malik walks past the mural one last time. It's nearly invisible now, overtaken by weather, dust, and time. But in the right light, the figure still flickers, barely there, more shadow than shape. Someone has drawn another red dot on the wall, higher this time. When Malik sees it, he doesn't touch it. He just nods, then continues walking. Because some things don't fade. They shift form. They return through others, through echoes, through marks left quietly, where no one was supposed to look. A librarian at the university where Camille spoke requests a copy of Echoes. It isn't for circulation. She says it's for the silent shelf, a corner in the campus library where students submitted pieces, unpolished essays, and anonymous reflections live without fanfare. Camille mails the binder without a cover letter. She writes, "Filed by intention, not genre," on the back of the envelope. 2 weeks later, a sticky note appears beside the book that reads, "This one stayed." Malik doesn't know any of this. He's working on a new project, a series of diagrams drawn on translucent paper, layered like blueprints. Each sheet shows the same space, one room, 4 walls, but the contents change. In one version, the floor is flooded. In another, every object is upside down. In a third, the walls are made of mirrors. He doesn't label them. He stores the stack in a folder marked Maybe. His teacher watches from a distance. She doesn't ask what the drawings mean. She's learned not to dissect what comes from somewhere too deep for clean explanations. Instead, she arranges for an artist in residence to visit the school and hold a session called Mapping the Interior. She hopes Malik will attend. She doesn't ask. Camille begins receiving messages from educators. Some want permission to use excerpts from Echoes in class. Others want to invite her to speak again. She declines most of them. Not because the work is done, but because she believes it now lives better in fragments, circulating in photocopies, handwritten transcriptions, and shared underlined pages. She replies to each email with the same sentence. "You don't need me to tell the story, just let it be heard." At home, Raymond finds an old folder while cleaning out a drawer. It's from his academy days, course notes, training scenarios, performance reviews. He flips through them slowly. The language is sharp, procedural, full of confidence. He remembers believing in those pages. He remembers the weight of certainty before it cracked. He doesn't throw the folder away. He adds it to the same drawer where Malik's earliest sketches live. They don't match, but they belong beside each other now. One evening, Malik attends the artist session. He sits near the back, sketchbook in his lap, listening as the speaker describes how artists track memory across space, how sometimes a drawing isn't a plan, it's a record. Not of what happened, but of how it was survived. Malik doesn't speak. He draws. At the end of the session, he leaves behind one of his translucent sheets on the table. The artist finds it after everyone leaves and folds it carefully into a notebook without a name. The next week, a student Malik doesn't know hands him a small card. It reads, "I started drawing after I saw yours. Mine don't make sense yet. That's okay, right?" Malik nods, says nothing, and writes one word on the back. Always. Camille walks past a bookstore downtown. In the window is a display titled Voices That Echo. One of the books leans against a small placard with a familiar name, hers. She doesn't go inside. She just watches how a woman pauses to look at the cover, then steps away. That's enough. At night, Malik tapes one of his blueprints above his desk. He chooses the one with no doors. Instead, there's a single window drawn halfway open. Outside it, lines without end. He doesn't color them in. He just lets the blank space stay. Because some rooms aren't meant to be escaped. They're meant to be understood. And when you can't open a door, sometimes drawing the window is how you keep breathing. A school on the other side of the city requests permission to display student artwork from Malik's district. The coordinator says they're organizing an exhibit titled Unseen Structures, focused on youth expression through abstraction. The request is informal, no applications, no curation, just an email from one art teacher to another. Malik's teacher asks him quietly if he'd like to submit something. He doesn't answer right away. The next morning, he places 2 of his blueprint drawings in a folder and hands them over without a word. The receiving school mounts them near the library entrance. There's no label identifying the artist, only a line of text beneath each image. Interior, Diagram 1, and Interior, Diagram 4. Students walk past them between classes, backpacks bumping into corners, shoes squeaking against tile. Some slow down, a few stop completely. One teacher prints copies and uses them as writing prompts. The results range from poetry to questions to blank pages turned in deliberately. Meanwhile, Raymond receives a message from a former colleague. It's short, direct. Coffee sometime? He hasn't spoken to the man in almost a year. Not since the internal review, not since the barbershop. He rereads the message, then deletes it. 2 days later, he writes it down by hand and adds it to the drawer. Some conversations are better recorded than resumed. Camille finds a letter taped to her apartment door. No envelope, no name, just a single page with typed text. It reads like a reflection, not a message. We thought policy would fix us, but silence isn't always a problem. Sometimes it's a place, and sometimes the ones who stop talking are the only ones still listening. She folds the page once and places it between the last 2 chapters of Echoes. She doesn't know who sent it. She doesn't need to. Malik's class visits the museum for a field trip. It's not a major institution, just a small community gallery tucked into an old municipal building. But it has real walls, real lighting, and staff who treat every visitor like they matter. One of the exhibits includes mixed media work inspired by youth trauma and spatial memory. Malik sees a piece that looks like his own, but rougher. The lines are thicker, the shapes more crowded. He stands in front of it for almost 5 minutes. When the chaperone calls for the group to move on, he stays 1 moment longer, tracing a line that stops mid-air and never resumes. That night, he redraws it from memory. Same shapes, same halted line. But this time, he extends it. Past the break, past the edge of the page. When the pencil leaves the paper, he doesn't lift it. He keeps moving his hand across the desk, over the wood, into nothing. Across town, Raymond walks a familiar beat. Not on duty, not in uniform, but through habit. His shoes still remember the cracks in the sidewalk. He nods to shop owners, steps aside for bikes, watches how shadows stretch between buildings as the sun drops lower. He stops outside the old barber shop. It's under renovation now. The windows are covered in brown paper and a sign reads, "Opening soon, fresh start cuts." The name stings a little, but the second word matters more. He walks away without pausing. Some stories don't need monuments. They need release. At school, Malik adds a new drawing to the basket beside the art room sink. This one has no map, no figures, just a dense tangle of looping lines in the bottom corner of the page. At the top he writes, "For what still shakes." No one asks what it means. Someone else adds a page behind it, a single black dot in the center of white paper, nothing else. The teacher leaves them both untouched. Because connection doesn't always start with clarity, sometimes it begins in fragments. A dot, a smudge, a broken line redrawn by someone who never met the one who started it. The university's art department publishes a digital zine each semester, curated by students. It's not widely circulated, but it reaches a quiet audience: professors, local artists, educators who still believe that early work matters. One student editor finds Malik's blueprint diagrams online, posted anonymously through a community archive. There's no name, but something about the layering, how the lines stretch across transparency, stays with her. She reaches out to the archive's curator, asking for permission to feature the images. The curator forwards the request to Malik's teacher, who prints it and places it gently on Malik's desk. Malik reads it 3 times. He doesn't say yes or no. That night, he scans 3 of his diagrams and titles them for the first time: Interior Break, Interior Return, and Interior Without Sound. He emails them to the address on the paper. He doesn't attach his name. The next issue of the zine opens with his images, untitled, uncredited, but unavoidable. Raymond hears about it a week later, not from Malik, but from Camille. She sends him a link with no subject line. He opens it during a lunch break, standing at his kitchen counter, sipping coffee that's already gone cold. The diagrams fill the screen, delicate lines, layered transparencies, edges that fray into white space. He recognizes his son's hand not by signature, but by restraint. There's something familiar in the quiet between lines. Camille writes a short essay for the same issue. She doesn't mention Malik or the officer or herself. Instead, she reflects on how unmarked stories move through cities like wind, unseen but felt in rustling leaves, shifting blinds, the way smoke bends around a corner. She closes with a line that becomes the issue's final quote. "Some voices are drawn, not spoken. We listen by looking." At school, Malik starts keeping his drawings in a box instead of a folder. He says it's easier to see them all at once that way. The box isn't labeled. It sits under his bed, next to a pair of sneakers he doesn't wear anymore. Once a week, he adds a new piece. Sometimes they're finished, sometimes they aren't. He doesn't plan what he draws. He just responds. The art teacher notices how other students start placing their sketches in envelopes, labeling them for later, for space, or for after this. The room changes. Not louder, just steadier. Like the sound of pencils on paper has found a tempo everyone understands. Raymond receives a letter from a young man he doesn't know. It's handwritten, the penmanship uneven but strong. The writer says he's applying to the police academy and wants to speak to someone who left the force early. Someone who didn't leave because of failure, but because they saw something that couldn't be unseen. Raymond doesn't respond right away. He reads the letter twice, then folds it into the drawer where the training manual still waits. 3 days later, he writes a reply. Not advice, not instruction, just a list of questions no application ever asks. Camille is invited to participate in a panel discussion about youth and narrative agency. She declines the invitation but offers to send an excerpt for someone else to read. She selects a passage about invisible work, the kind that builds bridges without claiming credit. The panel reads her words aloud at the end of the session. A student in the audience copies them by hand, underlines the phrase, "What you build in silence still holds weight." That same week, Malik begins a new drawing series. It's titled Response. The first image shows nothing at all, just faint grid lines, no figures, no marks. The second contains a ripple near the edge, like water disturbed off frame. The third shows 2 lines meeting at a sharp angle, not touching, just nearing. He doesn't show them to anyone yet. He places them carefully inside the box, because sometimes the most important part of a story isn't what it reveals, it's what it leaves open. And the most honest kind of response is the kind still taking shape. The community center hosts a new installation titled Lines of Quiet. It's not widely advertised, just a few posters in school halls and public libraries, hand-drawn arrows pointing toward it like whispers. Inside, the room is dim, the walls matte gray, and the lighting soft around the edges. Visitors move slowly, not because they're told to, but because the space teaches them how. In the far corner, 3 translucent sheets hang from the ceiling, each layered slightly in front of the next. The first holds only grid lines. The second shows a ripple in one corner. The third bears 2 angled lines, frozen just before touching. A small placard on the floor beneath them reads, Response Series, Anonymous Submission. People stop, not for long, but with purpose. One child holds a parent's hand and points to the gap between the final 2 lines. They almost meet, she says, and the adult simply nods. Another visitor scribbles something in a notebook. It's not the contact, it's the nearness. The room doesn't echo, it absorbs. Malik visits the exhibit early in the morning, before it opens to the public. He walks the perimeter slowly, then stands in front of his own work for several minutes. He doesn't touch anything. He doesn't leave a mark. On his way out, he places a folded card on the small comment table near the exit. It doesn't contain a name, just a drawing. 1 dot, 1 line, and a soft curve connecting them. Camille receives a message that same week from a young journalist who found echoes on a library shelf. The message is short. It says, "I didn't know stories could sound like that." Attached is a photo of a classroom chalkboard where someone has copied one of her lines in large, deliberate handwriting. You don't always have to raise your voice to leave a mark. Camille saves the image. She doesn't reply, not because it doesn't matter, but because it already did. Raymond returns to the barber shop, now fully renovated. He enters quietly, sits in the back, doesn't ask for a cut. He just watches the new owner, young, careful, respectful with each customer. There's no framed mural, no plaque on the wall, but near the register there's a sketch tacked behind glass, a spiraled red line on an old receipt. Raymond doesn't ask how it got there. He knows enough now to recognize what doesn't need explaining. That evening, Malik finds a small envelope on his desk. Inside is a photograph. It's the same drawing he left on the exhibit table, now printed and framed with a handwritten note on the back. Kept, not claimed. There's no signature, no sender. He pins it on the wall beside his bed and turns off the light. Across the city, more schools begin to post student work anonymously. It's not a movement, not a policy, just a pattern. A teacher leaves a folder labeled, "For what doesn't fit the rubric." A librarian starts archiving unnamed stories by year, by tone, by silence. A high school counselor offers a draw it instead option during intake. Nothing official, everything intentional. Camille finishes a new essay, not for publication, but for a future she doesn't yet know. She titles it, What We Build in Absence. It's less about events, more about what stayed. She ends with a line that echoes a page long folded in her memory. Stories don't fade when the world turns away. They just keep walking quietly beside the ones who carry them. Malik begins a final diagram. One large circle. Inside it, overlapping curves, scattered dots, a single line that exits the shape and never returns. He tapes it to the wall without ceremony, then closes the sketchbook for the first time in months. Not to stop, but to rest. Because some stories don't end. They take root. They become new rooms, new maps, new hands learning to draw what was never named and still deserves to be seen.